Well, hello, everybody. This is Jan Rutherford, and welcome to Managing Remote Teams. Hope everybody's doing great, and hopefully you can hear me. Hey, 1/4 of all employees are ignored by their boss, resulting in 40% disengagement. My guess is that's even higher with remote workers. After interviewing over 100 corporate, military, entrepreneurial, academic, and nonprofit leaders in the past year, I believe most organizations were designed for an environment that no longer exists. And part of that new environment is virtual. Remote teams are often made up of temporary and contract workers as well. And according to a study by Intuit, the rise of the on-demand economy is part of a long-term growth trend that predicts 43% of American workers will be independent contractors by 2020. And a study by RBC predicts that virtually all job openings will place significant importance on judgment and decision making, and more than 2/3 will value an ability to manage people and resources. Managing a remote team alongside full-time staff can certainly be a challenge, but a diverse and permeable team can provide a distinct competitive advantage to your organization. I'm Jan Rutherford. I entered the Army at age 17 and 18 months later became an Army Green Beret. I'm a former CEO and currently a keynote speaker, author, coach, and lead wilderness expeditions with executives and veterans, all in an effort to help leaders and teams achieve heroic aspirations. In the next 20 minutes, I'll walk you through what it takes to effectively manage a remote team. One thing I learned in the military and in business is that a cohesive team brings out the best in people. Nailing the dynamics of a remote team will yield a distinct advantage and help you adapt to the new realities of the future of work. So the seminal question here really is, how do you manage people whom you do not see? That is what we'll look at answering. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, put those in chat and I'll answer those at the end. And if you have topics for future webinars that you'd like to suggest, put those in chat as well. So what's a team anyway? Well, one of the references I use often, especially with MBA students, is James Clausen out of University of Virginia. And he wrote a book, Level 3 Leadership. And these aren't new concepts. It's about shared leadership. It's about team accountability, a team with a distinctive purpose, shared work and solid relationships, open-ended meetings and excellent communication, clear roles for all, direct collective measures, metrics, and then real work. The work matters and the results are exceptional. That's really what a team is. But what about a virtual or remote team? Of course, they live in different parts of the world, different cultures, multiple time zones, different languages, and almost all communication is electronically and rarely, if ever, in person. But just because you have workers who may be paid differently, work in varied locations, or work different hours, doesn't mean the way they're motivated is any different than the rest of your staff. And leadership matters more now than ever. 20% say managers hurt their career. That's 1/5. 1/4 of all employees believe they're ignored by their boss, resulting in 40% disengagement. I mentioned that at the opening. 1/3 think that all feedback produced a decline in performance. And when we receive feedback, we shift into fear or flight mode anyway. And when we do, this takes us out of the ability to learn or create. Look at this. 2/3 would rather have a better boss than a raise. That's despite what we're hearing in the news. Managers account for at least 70% of the variance in engagement, and over 80% don't trust us to tell the truth. So Jeffrey Pfeffer out of Stanford recently wrote a book called Dying for a Paycheck. And what he found is that this job stress is costing us billions and may cause 120,000 excess deaths a year. And to put that into perspective, in the top 10 causes of death, that would come in at number 6. So we really have an obligation and a duty to make sure that we're treating all our workers effectively, not just the remote workers, but all of our people. Kind of the Hippocratic oath, do no harm. So let's look at what Google learned from its quest to build the perfect team. They found a few things. One, if they provided an environment that was safe, that where risk and vulnerability were okay. They looked at dependability, that people were punctual and on time and did what they said they were going to do. They were reliable. They found clarity about roles and goals was extremely important. They needed meaning or purpose. They needed to feel that what they were working on was personally important, and they wanted to have an impact. What they were doing mattered. What they really found at the bottom line was they respected each other as humans, and they understood each other as humans outside of just coworkers. And the amount of time that was spent in the meeting was shared equally. There wasn't a quiet church mouse. There wasn't somebody that hogged the conversation. That's what they found was an effective team. So what are the unique challenges for remote teams? One is the camaraderie. Because we're remote, they don't necessarily have a sense of place and purpose. There's a lot that's missed because of so much of what we communicate is nonverbal. Oftentimes they don't have the big picture insight. They feel like cogs in the wheel. And what I would really highlight here is the fact that we don't have two-sided trust. And this is really important in the basis of all teams. So let's look at this a little bit. That two-sided trust, there's really three things. One, let's start with team alignment. This is really about relationships and results, or task and behavior, however you want to call it. It's the yin and the yang. And what I found on the expeditions I run and when I take students to Ireland and work with millennials, if I can be really clear about the expectations and what I value, that really sets great expectations as far as alignment. As an example, when I lead expeditions, I'll say that what we're looking for are people that are selfless, that are adventurous, not just physically, but they're willing to be bold, and they possess heroic aspirations beyond power and money. When I take students to Ireland, what's really important, I say that they have to be punctual because 12 people or 15 people are depending on them. They need to be curious as students, inquisitive, active listening. They need to have stamina and endurance because we're working long days, and a lot of them aren't used to that. And they need to put the team first. And when I'm clear about that, I find that people will rise to those expectations. In the military, commanders at the top of an organization issue what's called commander's intent. It's a guidance that succinctly describes what success looks like for the organization. It also covers the purpose and standards that define the endpoint. It's from this intent that goals and objectives throughout the organization are aligned. And of course, the best way to know if your team knows what's expected of them is to ask them where they're going. Ask them to replay back to you their goals and objectives. Listen for them to articulate who does what by when and to what standard. The conditions for the end state or standards are critical to ensure time and quality guidelines are met. The military also has a saying that you can expect what you inspect. Make sure you're available to catch people doing things right and to offer course corrections as needed. Just make sure to help without smothering. So the next part is meetings. This is where we interact the most. And as we learn from Google and others, we need to humanize these meetings and socialize, and there should be a benefit to all. And we need full participation. That is an expectation that you can't sit there and not weigh in. And if people aren't weighing in, we have to really look in the mirror and ask, is it because of fear? They're afraid to. We've done something with the environment where there's fear, or there's complacency. They just don't care. And again, we've got to look in the mirror on that. And then the other part is the feedback, or what we call in the military an after-action review, a debrief. So you've got to make time to ensure your guidance is fully understood. You'll never have enough time unless you make it. And I know you have a million things going on, but being there for your team is one of the truly essential tasks of leadership to ensure team success. The best leaders know how to make their people their top priority. So third thing, decisions. And this is a tough one, and I've met very few organizations out there that really have clearly articulated a decision-making process. And sometimes this requires actually leading less. But we have to establish what the decision process is, the protocols, the criteria, and the authority. And you want to provide your team space to work autonomously so they can innovate. Goals are the objectives of the team's efforts, ambition, aim, and desired results. Goals don't cover the how those objectives will get done. You want your team to feel empowered to figure out the how. So here's 10 reminders. Make sure you seek maximum appropriate involvement in decision making as much as you can. Very few of our decisions need to be made immediately. And again, time slows it down, and you have to be okay with that. Build a team charter and operating agreements, what I would call the ground rules. Foster trust based on performance. Train everyone in a common language and skill set. Share responsibility for meeting management. You shouldn't be the one running every meeting. Set expectations for helpful team behaviors collectively with the group. Make sure that everybody models constructive and affirming feedback. Get together for learning and socializing on a regular basis. Maintain a shared file database with common use protocols, and externalize your thinking. And by that, I mean help people understand why you are stating what you're stating, how you got there, what your thinking process is. Make that very clear to people so that they can understand how you got there. And again, that takes time. So here's the 3 things that build two-sided trust. Team alignment, meetings, because that's our social interaction, the way that we communicate. And then out of those meetings, how decisions are made that affect the path forward. And again, and it circles right back to, based on those decisions, what did we learn from it? Are we aligned? Do we need to meet again? Do we need to catch people doing things right? Do we need to course correct? So the keys to success are really simply organizational alignment and a team that has both a plan and aligned people that have commitment. So you might remember this little pyramid from Patrick Lencioni, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And a big part of this is meeting the everyday challenges we're all facing, managing conflict. What are the ideal team roles? How do we make decisions to solve problems? How do we express opinions? Can we? Do we feel comfortable? Are we delivering quality output, whether we're a techie or a fuzzy? Are we generating innovative ideas? And most importantly, are we adapting to change? And that's where we've got to really look. Have we built the trust? Do we have healthy conflict? Do we come out of these meetings with true commitment versus compliance? Do we hold each other accountable, that it's shared responsibility, not just the leader's responsibility? And are we focused on results? Something that's absolutely clear that points to success of the organization. And if you'd like more information on this, on my website, I've got selfreliantleadership.com/diagnostic. And there's 25 questions there that'll help you and your team really focus on areas where you can improve. That's what that diagnostic's all about. It's not necessarily to give you a score to say, you're good, bad, or indifferent. It's really to create a dialogue. So speaking of dialogue, when it comes to communication skills, we all know about emotional intelligence. And of course, the hardest one for most all of us is the self-awareness, not just to know what our behaviors are, but how our behaviors affect others. And then, do we have the ability to regulate, to control those behaviors, to deliver what the team needs at any given moment? Now, some people will say, oh, that's not me being very authentic. And I would say, well, this is about we before me. This is about putting the team first. What's the team need? Do they need you to be authentic and frustrated when that's going to be the least helpful emotion? Do they need you to put your fist down at certain points when you don't really feel it, but they need a swift kick? That's really where this comes in. And of course, there's social skills, understanding the group dynamic. There's empathy and motivation. And the big question is, can these be learned? And of course they can. There's lots of different ways. And if you'd like a refresher on that, I'd refer you to Dan Goleman and others that are putting some great articles out on LinkedIn these days. So the way to really figure out if we're delivering a lot of those emotional intelligence is through 6 of the 12 Gallup survey questions. And this applies to workers that are in person or remote. And that is, in the last 7 days, have they received recognition and praise for doing good work? twice a year is someone talking about their progress, their career path. We know if people don't feel that there's a path, they're going to be looking elsewhere. Do they have an opportunity all the time to learn and grow? Do they know what's expected? This is the important one. Do they know what's expected? I can't tell you how many organizations I've gone in and asked people, what's the difference in meeting the standard and exceeding the standard? And they have no idea what I'm asking. There's somebody that encourages their development, and people actually care about each other as people. So what we know is what this yields is the top 50% of highly engaged organizations double the odds of success. And let's just look at three of these: customer ratings or relationships, profitability, finance, production, efficiency. Now, you can quantify all of these, but you can also make these aspirational goals. So instead of just saying, I want to be efficient, have good relationships, and hit our goals, we could say, well, we don't want to be inefficient. We don't want to be harmful. We don't want to be unprofitable. But a healthier perspective is to say, boy, we want to be reliable. We want to be helpful. We want to be profitable. And really, if you really want to exceed the standard, it might be, boy, we want to be near flawless, as perfect as we can be. We want to be giving in our relationships. And when it comes to finance and what we do for the community, we want to be generous internally, externally, whatever those goals are. So there's ways to be truly aspirational. And it goes back to the behaviors that we want. Dan Pink looked at autonomy, purposefulness, and mastery as the three things that really motivate people. We know from Glassdoor the reason people quit companies is, number one, is salary. But I think that's mainly when they see a culture that's awry, or they're stagnant in their role and not learning and growing. And we can even tie this over to self-determination theory, psychological needs. And again, it's autonomy, it's relatedness, and it's competence. It's the same theme across the board. And what we know is that we need to issue positive versus negative reinforcements in a ratio of 5-to-1. We need to catch people doing things right 5 times more than we provide feedback. So let's look at circle of control. What are the things that we control regarding ourselves? Well, where we spend our time as leaders, how we respond to people. We control that. When it comes to the organization, we control what the structure looks like, the processes, and the incentives. We do control that. But what we don't control are others, people. We can influence them. And we know people support what they help create. And that relates back to how decisions are made. And of course, unfortunately, we spend way too much time in the circle of concern, which are all the external factors that we have no influence over. So let's look at standards. And this is from my friend Chris Warner. If you look at the x-axis, it's alignment of core values and behaviors. If you look at the y-axis, it's really about results. And of course, the green block recognizes superstars. The red are people that are moving out of the organization. But the big question is, what are you doing with the people in yellow? The people that are performing really well but are hard to get along with, or the people that are easy to get along with and aren't performing well? Are you moving them up or out? Are they getting the feedback? Are they getting the feedback in the right way? And this is important for these remote workers. So going back to coaching, what we know is a lack of effort to improve is when you want to have the difficult conversation with folks. And we also know, based on some academic research, that if we say statements like, I'm giving you these comments because we have very high standards and I know you can reach them, we're going to be most effective. So what this really involves is time to spend with folks, to ask them, where are we going? Do they understand the big picture? Do they understand their role? Do they understand what they're doing well? Do they have that self-awareness? If they have items that they're coaching or that they need to work on, do they understand those? Are you asking how you can help versus what can I do? And last, do you have suggestions? And of course, if you're not getting suggestions from folks, it's either fear or complacency. And you have to look in the mirror on that. So this is a team that I took out to the Wallowa Mountains last year and asked them to come up with 3 answers to 3 questions. How do you define a high-performing team? How can a team achieve shared accountability? And how is a team's performance measured? And what we found is that as far as how a team is defined, it's about your intent as the leader being understood. As far as accountability, it's trust built through respect, support, and cooperation. And as far as measuring, it's about people demonstrating initiative and creativity. So it goes back to, how do you manage people whom you do not see? And what I would say is, it really is about trusting them, trusting yourself. Quick story. One of the guests we've had on the podcast, the music conductor at the Colorado Symphony, is a 38-year-old named Brett Mitchell, phenomenal leader. And he said that when he's conducting, chances are he's going to hear 14 mistakes. And it's his job to let 11 resolve themselves, or to realize those 11 don't matter much. It's to focus on the 3 that do. But it was really about trusting the orchestra, trusting himself. And it was a two-way street. And even though the conductor's back is to the audience, there's a lot going on from a nonverbal perspective in the way that the conductor points to people, to pays attention and understands those nuances. And I think that's what's absolutely critical and vital when we're looking at managing remote workers. So the last thing I'll leave you with is, there's a new course that I created that got published out on LinkedIn Learning or lynda.com, and it's called Managing Temporary and Contract Employees. It's 20 different 5-minute videos, and it might be something that is extremely helpful to all of you. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and see if we've got anything in the chat, and I do. One of the questions was, every 7 days seems frequent for praise for each person on the team. No, question mark. Well, I would say, I mean, you think back to the person that asked this, I would ask you, how do you feel if you go a whole week without hearing any sort of positive feedback? And I would ask you to even think about the World Cup going on right now, or the recent NBA tournament. Those folks are coached constantly. During training, during the game. It is not a once a week thing. It's not twice a year. So the evidence, the research shows that we really do need that sort of frequent praise. And it has to be, according to an acronym I like to use called TSP, it has to be truthful and timely. It has to be specific, and it has to be personal. You can't just say, great job. So that's the only question I see in there. What I'll do is, we've recorded this. I will post this out on the website. So if you'd like to share that with other folks that you work with, that would be great. I promised that this would be a 20-minute webinar, so I'm going to keep it to that, and look forward to your feedback on what you'd like to see in the future, as we'll be doing these once a quarter. So again, thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.